Greetings and welcome to the Dr. J Vlog series. It is Wednesday, September 24th, 2025, and on Wednesdays we talk about emotional well-being and relationships. And so today and all this week we've been talking about planets and astrology, and so I'm going to talk about astrology and the connections between astrology, the planets, and again, our emotional health and well-being. And I'm going to do it in three parts. So today, again, we're just going to look specifically at the issue of well-being and possible benefits. Tomorrow, we're going to look at knowledge under the vlog series on knowledge and science. We're going to delve into the scientific research on astrology. And then on Friday, we're going to look at human behavior and justifications. But we're going to be looking at astrology and holistic practices in general, including the ethical justifications that are involved and why people still continue, and sometimes for very good reason, to consult these alternative sources. All right, so part one. And I'm going to preface my remarks by saying that I've never really been a huge fan of astrology in the sense that I haven't given it a lot of credence. It's something that's just kind of, I've always thought of it as kind of fun, like reading fortune cookies at a Chinese restaurant. But as so often happens in life, the longer that we live, the more we can start to see the value then in certain things that our perspectives can evolve. They can change, and certainly mine has as well. So again, I'm not a diehard practitioner as such, but I have seen, well, I should say that I have changed. I do see some real value in the perspective. And that's because I've studied a bit more, I've learned a bit more, and I'm a little bit more familiar than with alternative knowledge systems and health practices than I was many years ago. So let's back up though. Let's consider briefly at least the fact that human beings, as far as we know, have always looked up to the skies and sought signs and used the stars and the planets and the comets and certainly the sun to try to make sense out of their worlds. And notably, if you go back to ancient Mesopotamia, for example, astrologers believed that celestial events could predict health outcomes and guide treatment decisions. And similarly, Egyptian physicians back in the day consulted star charts to determine the more favorable times for surgeries and administering remedies of various kinds. And then the Greek astrologer physicians, folks like Ptolemy, some of you probably familiar with, developed the concept of medical astrology. That is, linking the zodiac signs with different body parts and then using planetary positions to help diagnose illnesses. And Chinese astrology incorporated the five elements theory into health practices so that each element corresponded to specific organs and emotional states. And then practitioners would use the system to maintain balance and help people prevent illness and so on. The Mayan astrologers from Mesoamerica, they studied health issues as well and linked these to this intricate calendar system that they had. They believed that certain days, again, were more favorable for rituals and treatments and so on. And Persian astrologers developed the concept of medical elections, choosing optimal times for medical procedures based on planetary alignments. And then even with the Renaissance too, astrologer physicians created detailed natal charts to assess an individual's health predispositions and to recommend the different types of personalized treatments. And nowadays, of course, we just consult our physicians in that regard, right? We don't necessarily expect them to consult star charts, do we? Or, especially in light of the biomedical advances that have prevailed. And yet it's still, of course, the case that so many people do believe we can and should look to the skies. We should consult the heavens with respect to our health, with respect to our life experiences, and etc. So astrological influences then are rooted in the belief that celestial bodies and their positions can affect human life and behavior. And so the concept forms the basis then for understanding how astrology can possibly relate to issues like emotional well-being and mental health. The placement of the planets at the time of one's birth is presumed to shape their personality and life experiences. Now, to be clear, this is something that I've never personally believed in, but again, I'm willing to at least entertain the possibility. So astrologers then look at the angles between the planets, known as aspects, to interpret their interactions. And these aspects can be harmonious or challenging, potentially influencing a person's well-being. So that the houses in an astrological chart represent different areas of life. A planet's position in a specific house may indicate its influence on that life aspect. So a birth chart or a natal chart is a snapshot of the sky at the moment of one's birth, and it serves as a personal map then for helping to understand the potential health strengths and challenges that one might confront along the way. Astrologers then examine the position of the sun, the moon, the ascendant signs to gain insights into a person's physical health and emotional constitution. And then the sixth house in a birth chart is often associated with health and daily routines. Okay, so the belief is that certain planetary placements then might suggest predispositions to specific health concerns. I'm not sure how accurate that is, but for instance, a prominent Saturn might indicate a tendency towards skeletal issues. And so the 12 zodiac signs then are believed to influence our emotional tendencies and mental states as well. So each sign is associated with particular personality traits and coping mechanisms. Fire signs like Aries and Leo and Sagittarius, they're often linked to enthusiasm and assertiveness. Earth signs, which include Taurus, Virgo, and Capricorn, are typically associated with practicality and stability. Air signs, Gemini, Libra, and Aquarius, are connected to intellectual and social qualities. And water signs, which include Cancer, Scorpio, and Pisces, are often related to emotional depth and intuition. And so the idea is that if you understand your zodiac sign, it could provide insights then into your personality, into your emotional patterns, potential stress responses, and so on. And I don't necessarily think that this is true in any kind of ultimate grand scientific sense, because I mean, again, just as in my view, and even having looked at, done a much deeper dive into astrology, I think that all of us have different elements within our personality across the different zodiac signs. We're not just, one thing as such. So for me, what's important about the information that we gather, and then is how we then can use that information in helpful or constructive ways to enhance our well-being. Right? And I don't just mean in terms of a placebo effect, which I'm going to talk about tomorrow, but if we believe that the information is important, then that's probably going to affect how we view the situation, and it can affect our responses. And that can be, of course, quite helpful. So, for example, we know that at least some practitioners integrate astrological concepts into their holistic therapies and their mindfulness techniques. But whether there's a cause and effect relationship, say, between the planets and our well-being, I think kind of misses the point here. In other words, what's important is that someone, an expert, hopefully in the field, not a charlatan, although you might consider all such practitioners charlatan, but the people who've studied these issues and have, developed a knowledge base and have something to share in that regard, right? Hopefully they're good faith actors, and they're working as holistic practitioners then who can use and convey information in a way that's helpful for you and for me, for example. So they might explain how the treatment's working or might work based on how they've incorporated the zodiac signs and the planetary positions into their treatment plans. Now, again, you and I don't even have to believe that. We don't have to understand. We don't have to agree with, maybe what we perceive to be some kind of esoteric interpretation of things. But the question, of course, is, does what they're doing actually work? And that to me is the key. So it's a lot like my wife with her healing touch practice. Okay, she knows a lot about energy flows and chakras and much more. And I've sometimes, mostly jokingly, question the validity of the knowledge, and I talk about the placebo effects, etc. But the point is that she gives these healing touch treatments, and again, speaking for myself, it always works. So why is that the case? And I'm a hardcore scientist in many respects. So, and then she's given healing touch to dozens, maybe even hundreds. I don't know how many people, of people over the years, and almost always it seems to have this positive effect. In fact, I would say, without exaggeration, at least 99% of the time. In fact, I think she's only said on one occasion did the healing touch that she administered not work or not have some positive effect, shall we say. So there's something happening, is what I'm suggesting. And our holistic practitioners, the best of them at least, and that includes astrologers, I think have something important to share. Again, even for people like me, historically, the skeptics or the agnostics or whatever. So the bottom line is that new information, new ways of thinking, all of this stuff is important in terms of the application of different techniques. Because if you think about it, or just something like health, for example, there are many pathways to healthy outcomes. There isn't just one fixed set approach to achieving optimal health or well-being. There's many different things that can happen along the way, and a multiplicity, and maybe even an intersection of many different approaches, if you think of it that way. Okay, and my general point is that something can work even if you and I don't fully understand exactly how and why that's the case. Right? So if I were to ask you, for example, do you know exactly how and why your cell phone works the way that it does? Most of you would probably say, no, I have no clue. Or you might just have the vaguest, basic understanding. And so instead, what do you have to trust that there are other, let's call them knowledge keepers out there who do really understand cell phones and how and why they work the way that they do. Okay? And that's kind of how I view holistic practitioners in general and the work that they do these days, including astrology. But I think the biggest contribution comes from the use of astrological themes to assist people, especially with things like guided meditations and mindfulness exercises. So the practitioners, of course, might have a certain detailed knowledge and expertise, and they might focus, for example, on specific planetary energies or zodiac signs and traits during their sessions. Or they might incorporate lunar phases, like having individuals align their intentions and their reflections with lunar cycles, and much more. So does that work from a scientific perspective? Well, I don't know exactly. Again, I'll talk about that tomorrow, but that's not the point. If you're actively doing mindfulness exercises and you're setting your intentions, then that's probably a good thing, whether or not you believe it's the moon making the difference or not. As an example. And in fact, researchers have noticed potential positive effects on mood and on stress reduction for some believers. Even just the act of consulting horoscopes or birth charts can serve as a form of mindfulness practice for certain people. And so I think astrology then can have some real benefits if we allow those benefits to unfold in a good faith way, and we use that information to actively try to improve our situations. Okay? So yeah, astrological birth charts, for example, can be used as a tool for introspection. They can highlight, personality traits and strengths and potential challenges. You don't have to agree with them. I don't think that I fit all of the traits of the Taurus as such. And again, I think we're all of these things to varying degrees. But what's important here is the reflection on our situations, the information that we have about ourselves. Again, whether you're taking that from the planets or the moon or the sun or what have you, how does all of that stuff matter? And what kind of reflections does it lead to in your own life? To me, that's what's important. Okay? Or in counseling, very specifically, sometimes people will use the client's birth chart to explore I keep hitting my microphone there, to explore psychological themes. Okay? And this can provide a unique lens then for discussing personal issues and life transitions. And so I think that's a good thing. And you can use these consultations or even just literally reading your horoscope to identify potential periods of growth and challenges. And that information can then help in terms of treatment planning and goal setting and so on. So again, what's important in my view, just to wrap this up, ultimately, is the extent to which people can find comfort and meaning in astrological explanations for life events. And to me, that can be quite helpful in terms of providing a sense of order and control, especially in uncertain times. I think religion can have that same effect. Whether you ultimately believe in God or believe in this religion or that religion, I think the point is that it can offer, again, this way of making sense out of the world and events around us. And astrology, too, can offer us a framework then for personal self-reflection and growth, at least potentially, if we use it in the proper way. But again, just to be clear, my final point here is it's just one source out of many, shall we say. It's one more tool that we might want to keep in our toolbox, even if we don't necessarily use it or use it that often. Okay? All right, well, that's it for today. Tomorrow, as I say, I'm going to look at the scientific issues surrounding astrology and some of the research and some of the critiques as well. So, and in the meantime, may you and yours continue to create peace in your lives, nurture love in your hearts, and dole out hugs in abundance. Peace.